What guides you as an artist? What are you searching for? What are your dreams? What drives you as you sit down at the blank page or canvas in the evening? What is your North Star? As artists, most of us seek to constantly move forward, trudging through sketchbooks and dirty studios to get somewhere. And though it seems counterintuitive, I've found often in my life that if I don't pause to take a moment to triangulate, I lose sight of where I am and where I am going. So in this episode, we are taking our first look at artistic North Stars, something to guide us ever on like the sailors of old looking to the heavens. Let's start with looking inward, seeing what North Star you might already hold dear, and then we'll talk about how to find one if you need to. Lastly, if we have the time in this podcast, we will talk about how to actually work toward that goal. But before all of that, what do I mean by North Star? In the Northern Hemisphere, Polaris, the North Star, is visible all year long in the night sky. This means that my ancestors used it to navigate at night, a constant beacon in cloudless skies to ensure they were always moving toward their desired destination. In modern culture, we use the term to refer to guidance and direction, something that we can aim for when the noise of life rises around us, obscuring our vision and clouding our thoughts. Some common examples of North Stars for artists might be, but are surely not limited to, expression, authenticity, impact and influence, mastery of skill, recognition and legacy, representation and ethics, or education and mentorship. There are many potentials, but that should be a good enough place to get us started. And speaking of getting started, do you already have a North Star artistically? Do you, as an artist, already have something that guides you, something to aim for with each of your projects and practice sessions? Some of you, right off the bat, will already have an answer to this question. As I was putting the script together, thinking about the outline and what I might ramble and talk about today, part of my own personal North Star began to materialize in my head. I have a pretty good concept of what drives me as an artist. However, I happen to be a very introspective person who spends way too much time thinking about how I think and so many other things, very often to my own detriment. I also happen to be 37 years old. I've had a long time to chew on these things. So if you find yourself in a space where you don't know, you simply draw and paint, and you don't know what drives you, what guides you, that's totally fine. That's really common. So let's talk through some strategies, some potential ways that you can decipher what your North Star might be if you don't know what it is, and maybe help yourself find one if that's where you are. Well, look at the things that you make. This might seem very elementary, but I find that we as humans often skip elementary things, and it's often to our detriment. So take a look in your sketchbooks. Look at the pieces that you've hung on the wall or your parents used to throw on the refrigerator. Think about the things that you make, the things that bring you joy. Often in those individual pieces, you will find answers to this question. You'll start to see that all of your work trends in a certain direction. Perhaps much of your work is fan art, and you might feel like, well, I don't really have any guidance. I don't have a North Star because all I do is copy other people's things. Take a look at the things that you like to copy. Do you have a tendency to only copy from a couple different anime or manga artists? Are you a really big fan of old school Marvel or DC? Are there particular artists that you just find that you have a massive amount of affection for? Examine those things, the things that you make. Do you like drawing people, or do you hate drawing people? We often tend one of those two directions. People are a wonderful thing to draw and to represent, but they're very intimidating for a large quantity of us. I am certainly in that realm. I would love to have a high level of skill when it comes to representing people, but they're fairly intimidating. And over time, I have dedicated way more of my practice time to dragons and cartoons and things like that. In the future, I may shift, I may change, but for now, when I look at the things that I make, if I were also to follow this advice, I love drawing robots and I love drawing dinosaurs and dragons. And I've had a blast drawing this little character that you're seeing in the background here. So part of my North Star is actually to bring stories to life. And that's part of what I'm doing now in the background here. This may end up simply being a practice piece, or this might actually be in the little children's book that I'm working on right now with Andorra and her dragon. I don't know that the dragon will play a huge role, but dragons are cool, and so you can't really go wrong representing a dragon. So take a look at the things that you make and see if they point you in a direction towards your star. Also, think about what inspires you. What kind of artists do you stumble upon on YouTube or Instagram? Do you look over the shoulders of at school and go, oh my goodness, what I would give to produce artwork like them? Think about the things that inspire you. They don't always point you towards your star. You might often find that your star is adjacent to their own, but it will point you in the right direction. It will tell you the kinds of things that you love. Now, this might not be the kind of stuff that you actually produce. Perhaps you draw all realistic things, but you really are inspired by and have a lot of affection for certain kinds of cartoons. Well, that will probably lead you towards something that is a little bit different than both of those. So look at the things that inspire you, the things that get you excited about making art, or the things that simply bring a lot of joy into your life when you look at them. The inspiration is often linked towards something you would like to be guided toward, and you can start to decipher whether that is your guiding star at this moment or whether you would like it to be that and identify it as such in the future. Think about your own dreams, aspirations, and goals. These three things are very important for us as artists. I spend a lot of time talking about goals and how important they are here on the channel, partially because I am a very literal and spreadsheet-oriented person. I like strategies and schedules, and goals really fit nicely into that same realm. I think for all of us as artists, goals are super important, but I think they look different depending on who you are. For me, they are often things that are very much tied to numbers. I want to have so many things, like 10 paintings by this date. I want to invest this amount of time or hours weekly into my artwork. I want to put 2 videos up a week, and then I want to eventually move that to 3. That's how I structure things. But my goals are not going to be transferable for all artists. If you find yourself as a person who is far more inspired, far more passionate about what you are doing, or maybe just more inspired by momentary passions, your goals might be the actual finished product with no numbers or dates or scheduling attached to it. That does not make it less valid, less important to you and your journey as an artist. But if you can focus on that goal, on your dream, the thing that you would really love to achieve someday, you might find that that thing itself is your North Star. It is the thing that guides you to where you want to go. And conversely, it might just simply point you in the right direction. If your dream is to be a comic book artist, if your dream is to be a concept artist, if your goal is to write a book or to produce a graphic novel, those things might in and of themselves be your North Star, or they simply might tell you these things lie along that path, and you can look beyond them to try to see, if I line all these up, where are they going to point me? What am I going to be focused on? So take a look at your dreams, your aspirations, and your goals, and they alone might point you in the right direction towards your North Star. Identify your values and beliefs, specifically those that seem to come out in your artwork. This is not terribly dissimilar from looking at what you make, But if you think about who you are, what you believe, the things that are really important to you, the things that either show up in your artwork now or you would like to show up in your artwork in the future, those things can also guide you. There are a lot of artists that decide that the purpose behind their art is to advocate for a particular group, to make the troubles and traumas of their life known to the world, usually to help others who have suffered the same kinds of things. This can be a massive guiding star for you as an artist. If there are things ethically, morally, that you think need to be brought out into the open. If these things are already showing up in your art, it might be pretty easy to nail them down, to understand what they are. But you might also find that these are things that you love seeing in other artists' work, or you have aspirations to include in your own. Maybe even you want to include them right now, but you're afraid of what others around you might think. These kinds of things will all start to affirm what is important to you, the kinds of things that might be guiding for you as you move forward with your artistic journey. So examine your beliefs, your values, the things that are important to you, and think about how you can represent those moving forward. In not a small way, this is actually what this channel is for me. Part of the values that I'm leaning on here is that artists are important creatures, that we are often a marginalized piece of society because most people that are non-artistic simply don't understand how we function. We have a tendency to be pushed into boxes. We have a tendency in some ways to be bullied by greater American society, maybe elsewhere too, but this is where I live, so this is what I can really talk about. That's part of the reason that this channel exists, is as a support structure for other artists who grew up in a world like I did, where art was looked down upon. It was a frivolous thing for children. And I want to support as many people as I can and construct an environment that does so, that says that no, art is fundamentally human. It is an important endeavor. It is like telling the story of our psychology and our humanity. It is no more or less important than literature is. And yet literature shows up as a required class, at least in this country, pretty much from about second or third grade until you graduate. Art should be included too. Now, maybe not everybody should have to make it, but I think that you should break it into art history and into studio classes, which is actually what I did when I was working at the charter school, is I separated it into those two arenas, because not everybody needs to produce things. But if you don't, there's a good chance that you're still going to glean a lot from understanding art history. It's at least as important as learning standard history as well. So think about your values and your beliefs, and they just might point you in the direction of your star. Ask other people that are close to you. Sometimes it's hard to get outside of yourself to understand who and what you truly are, and that's what friends are for. That's what community is for. They can often point out things that were so obvious, but you missed them because they were just a standard part of your life. So if you have artists in your life, I would ask them first. Just say like, hey, these are all my work, or you've seen my work over the last couple years. What is the thread of consistency here? If I have a style, how would you describe it? What do you think drives me as an artist? I'm struggling to understand where I'm going with this. First of all, most artists are going to be pretty kind about it because it's a struggle for a lot of us. Many artists end up in this headspace of like, what am I doing? Why am I dedicating time to this? It's stressful and it's hard. Why am I doing it? And if you bring that up to them, there's a good chance that they've been there before too, and they will likely be able to help you. Now, if you have a good community around you of non-artists as well, it can also be beneficial to ask them this question too. Your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever might be in your life that's close. Ask them about your artwork. Where do you think I'm going with this? What do you see as some points of consistency? And you might be surprised with the answers that you get. You might get some really intriguing responses. And I think that this is a good place to start. Lastly, think about how you emotionally respond to different kinds of art you make and the ones that you are exposed to. So I often finish a piece of artwork and I think of it as just a project, a thing that has been completed. But on rare occasions, I look back at pieces that I've made and I find that I have an emotional response. Usually it's nostalgia. I'm a very painfully nostalgic person. But sometimes I can actually tap into and feel the emotion that I felt when I made it. And sometimes that emotional response is very, very different. I look at a piece that was about anxiety or about stress or feeling overwhelmed. And then when I look at the piece, I go, oh, now I really imbibed that feeling. I'm really pulling that out of it. On the other side, think about the other artworks, not works that you made, but artwork that was made by other artists that affects you emotionally, and think about those. What kinds of art messes with you in a good way or a bad way? And think about how those things might point you in a direction that might guide you as you move forward on your artistic journey. Even if you have a solid understanding of your North Star after that first inspection, or maybe you've known for quite some time what your North Star was, I still think it's a good idea to take a look at other options. Looking at the other stars that lie out in the cosmos might just simply strengthen your resolve towards your original guiding star. But you might find that grafting other elements can be beneficial to you. And if you don't really feel like you have a guiding star, searching for one can be just the thing to help you move forward. So how do you search for a North Star? Many of the strategies here are going to tie into the same pursuits we talked about in deciphering what your North Star is in the moment. And honestly, maybe in natural extensions of those questions, formed and shifted into steps that you might take. So try exploring inspirational material. Give yourself the opportunity to stumble upon things that will inspire you, hook you, and carry you forward. If you find that you already know what your North Star is because you were able to look at the pieces that inspire you, it's still advantageous to take a look at a wide breadth of artwork. See what all is out there. See if new things grab you. I have had so many experiences over the years working with students where a student would stumble upon something maybe that they railed against in early years or hated, and they have this emotional reaction to it and they're inspired by it, and it shifts and changes everything. Most frequently, I saw this with Impressionism and Expressionism. A lot of my students over the years, and I think this is fairly ubiquitous, but at least for me, a lot of my students over the years tended to value realism as the number one thing when it came to their artwork. How realistic is their drawing or painting or sculpture? Well, this is challenged when you start coming to Van Gogh, to Monet, to Renoir. When you start looking at artists like this, things shift. These artists were less focused on realism. In fact, their artwork was an over-exaggerated response to too much time focused on realism. And so they're trying to capture a single moment, and they're trying to capture the emotion, the feeling that comes along with that moment. So when you go from looking at extremely proficient, realistic artwork, and all of a sudden you're seeing things like Starry Night, it is fundamentally different psychologically where that piece lines up in your mind. Some students were very upset by this at first. They would look at these impressionistic pieces and be kind of viscerally angry about it. How can these works be so famous? They look like they didn't take anywhere near the amount of time the other pieces did. They look like they're kind of scribbles, and sometimes we'd have a joke about how the word impressionism that we now attribute to that whole artistic movement was originally an insult thrown at the first piece because they were claimed to be nothing but sketches. These are just impressions of paintings. They're not even real paintings. But inevitably, there would be a chunk of the classroom who would look at these paintings, these beautiful, textural, colorful paintings, and their eyes would just open up. They would look at this and realize that there is another avenue for their drawings and paintings, that they can achieve something other than realism. That realism, for all of its benefits and boons, really doesn't convey emotion nearly as well as some of these other more modern styles of art. I suppose you could debate that, but I think that when you hit Impressionism, you hit this area where you're tying in just the right amount of realism with the right amount of emotional and artistic license, and you get really probably the most beautiful art that the world has ever seen. All of this comes back to seek other inspirations. See what else is out there, because you never know what is going to inspire you, what is going to grab your soul. I just talked to a student of mine a couple weeks ago, and he actually told me that some of the pieces that we discussed, a decade ago in class were the ones that have now put him on his own artistic journey. And it's really cool and it's really inspiring to see and to hear, because that singular set of pieces resonated so much with who he is as a person that now they're a part of his life forever moving forward. So explore other things, seek out new inspirations. Try engaging in manners of art that are exploratory in nature. So set yourself up with opportunities to simply explore in your drawing, your painting, your sculpture, whatever it is that is your medium. Honing in less, perhaps, and just play with those materials and ideas. This is a good strategy for discovering what holds your interest artistically. And so if you feel like you have been drawing or painting for a long time, you still don't quite know what your North Star is, you don't know where you're going, there's a good chance that you haven't discovered the right medium to really channel your artistic energies yet. And I don't mean that in a kind of weird way. I just mean that quite literally. This is an easier way to say this again. Going back to the classroom, I found that most of my students were one of three kind of artists. They were either a drawer, a painter, or a sculptor. And yes, they could overlap, but generally speaking, their brains functioned in one of those three ways. The drawers were people who generally thought in lines, they thought in rules, they were more strategic as how they moved through things. Generally, color wasn't a huge part of what they did, but it could sometimes be there. The painters were much more focused on the process, focused on shapes. They were the ones that were fine covering a whole canvas or a drawing surface and then slowly working it into what they wanted it to be. These are the people who would be totally fine writing a paper that is a mess and then slowly sculpting it into what they want. Whereas the drawers were a much higher tendency to try to get it right the first time. And then lastly, the sculptors were more a mix of the two, but focused in 3 dimensions, really focused on form and understanding things from that angle. Generally speaking, students fell into one of these 3 categories. And so sometimes I would have a person who loved making art and had been doing drawing for years. They thought of themselves as a drawer. And then the second they got into a painting class or a painting unit, everything would just erupt. It was like the curtain was pulled back and they finally had this epiphany and understood who they were as an artist. And this happened more times than I can possibly recount or recall. There were often artists who had struggled for years, who loved being in my classes, but were never very good. And then they hit acrylic or oil painting and it all made sense. Which is kind of interesting because moving that way is more difficult. You're moving from using a pencil to using a brush. And we, at least in the US, don't have a lot of experience, a lot of practice using brushes. So for a student to pick up the brush for the first time and find that that is more natural to them than something that uses a tool they use every single day, it says a lot about their natural inclination. So sometimes if you are struggling to find your guide, your North Star artistically, it's because you're not using the right tools. And so get out there, explore different things. Try painting if you're a drawer, try drawing if you're a painter, try working with clay, try working with metal. I loved working with metalsmithing, but try different things. Get out of your normal. Reflect on your life and experiences. Think outside of art and think about the things that are important to you, the things that have driven you to make big life decisions in the past. Now, of course, this is a much more psychological thing, but if we're talking about something as abstract as finding your North Star artistically, we're already way out in the ether. We're already talking about abstract things. So think about the other things in your life that drive you to make decisions. Again, are you driven by ethics, by representation, by morals, by values and beliefs? Are you driven by the need to leave a legacy, to take care of other people? These kinds of things, if they are really important to you in other places in your life, it's almost impossible that they don't infiltrate your artwork in some way. So take some time. Think about the things that are really important to you. If you've made decisions about the sports you play, the teams you're on, the bands you join, the college you go to, the jobs you take, the friends you make, the people you marry, if you've made big decisions like that, then you have things that you can look to. Things that you can look to understand a little bit more about who you are and what drives your big decisions. And from there, you can start to unravel things, to figure out which of those might tie in with you as an artist, to figure out what might be a good guiding star for you, what might be something worth following. Now, you either have determined what your North Star is, what it has been perhaps for months or years. And if that wasn't you, then hopefully now you're starting to think about what might be a good North Star for you. I don't assume that you've heard the last 20 minutes of me talking and had an epiphany, and now you know things. I'm hoping, honestly, that you'll pause the video, you'll go think for a while, or you'll listen to the rest of it and you'll come back later and have a better understanding of who you are. But once you have determined that North Star, either you found this is the one you've been following all along, or you've determined what you want to follow, you're going to have to take some time and decipher if it's actually right for you. I wish that there was a way to know for certain right off the bat that this is the right choice, this is what I ought to do. But life is not that simple, and you're going to have to sit in it for a while. And that's actually the first strategy here for deciphering if it's the right guiding star for you. Live in it for a while. So just follow that star. Set your ship towards that point in the future and follow it for some time. If you have the ability, the luxury to work on your artwork daily or weekly, spend a month following this particular goal and then evaluate. If you really think that your guiding star is to leave a legacy through graphic novels and comics, then dedicate a month towards planning and actually executing some pages and some spreads. Do some research. Don't leave yourself entirely in the planning stage for this living in it period, or you won't actually have an understanding. You're going to need to do some planning and some executing, and then step back and go, does this feel right? Is this rewarding? Is this satisfying? And it might be hard. It might be very hard at first. If you've just changed direction, just like a boat or a plane or a car, you're going to lose some momentum. And so it might feel awkward at first. If you were doing all portrait painting and now you're switching to more abstract, non-representational work, you're going to lose some momentum. And you're going to feel that at first. And the unfortunate reality is our nature is to take that drop in momentum and go, well, evidently this was the wrong choice, and to turn back to what we were doing before. And you might be right, but you don't know. And that's hard. It's hard because we want to just have an answer and have the right, correct direction for ourselves immediately. And that's not how life works. So live in it for a while. Analyze what's going well, give yourself some grace and understand that that momentum shift might be difficult and it might cut some of your progress in your work. If you were making really, really good comics and now you're readjusting to making short stories or children's books, it's going to be hard. Your artwork's probably not going to be on the same level because the things that you focus on, the things that you practice, you tend to do better. So if you're shifting directions, you're probably going to take a hit there. So live in it for an adequate amount of time. I wish I could tell you that's 90 days or a year, but it's really determined by how much time you're putting into your artwork, what you might be shifting toward, and your skill level and how old you are. For me, it's probably about 3 to 6 months. That's about how long I would need to evaluate something like that. If I was still in school where I could dedicate 10, 15, 20 hours towards art a week, then I could probably make that decision inside of about 2 months. So, depending on where you are in your journey, this might be very different for you. Another thing is to seek feedback and input from those around you, those who know you well, and then from artists. So, you might have noticed earlier I said seek the advice of artists first. I've intentionally flopped them here because when you're seeking input and feedback on whether this decision was right for you from people who know you really well, you're going to get feedback about your general state of being, how happy you've been, how satisfied you've been. These are not necessarily artistic things, and you're going to get better feedback from the people in your life who know you really well. If it turns out that you've selected a new guiding star and your mother thinks that you've just been miserable for the last 2 months, there's a chance those two things are connected, and your day-to-day joy is more valuable than your artistic progress. So talk to the people in your life that are close to you, that understand you. Share this journey with them and get their input. The kinds of inputs that you're probably going to want to ignore are going to be the ones where they think that your journey is foolish or they don't understand your journey. From those close to you, you're really just looking for a progress check on how you're doing as a human being. So seek that first, and then seek it from other artists. Find artists in your life or on an online Discord community like we have for this channel, which I will have linked in the description below, but run it by other artists. I've been dedicating the last 60 days towards this pursuit. This is the artwork. Here's my story. What are your thoughts? You will be amazed at the kind of feedback you will get from other artists. They have all been in that position, or they're anticipating being in that position in the future. And so, of course, they are going to want to help you and to aid you in that endeavor. Try documenting and journaling things as you move. I am terrible at journaling. I know that it's great. I know that it's a good thing, that it's helpful for me, but I'm bad at it. But there are a lot of people in my life and a lot of people that I know that are really good at journaling. And if you take notes, if you document things as you're moving forward, if you journal, there's a good chance that that might be really good for helping you decipher how well this new strategy has worked. And in fact, though I'm not good with journaling, I'm really, really good with documenting. In fact, behind the screen on Adobe Premiere here, as I am recording this right now, I've got my video checklist and plan for all the videos that I record. I document everything. It's partially because it just helps me keep track of things and keep me sane, but it also helps me verify later on how well something worked. If I planned on doing 6 videos a week and then found out that I couldn't hit that 3 weeks in a row, I know that I'm trying to do too much. 6 videos would be way too much, by the way. Don't do that. That's crazy. But you can't usually know what you're capable of until you try to do it, and I document everything so that I know. But I would highly encourage taking notes, documenting, or journaling. One of those will probably work for you. And then lastly, as I mentioned, kind of wrapped up in all of these, is evaluate after a while. After a while, sit down, see how it's working, and gauge the effectiveness. And if you need to go back to the drawing board, pick a different guiding star for a while, that's totally fine. And sometimes you just need to pull up the anchor from your ship and let your ship be tossed around by the waves for a while. See where the wind leads you. This is probably a good option if you've tried something new and it doesn't seem to be working. Just go with the flow for a little while and try to figure out what you think might be a good direction for you to follow. Well, the original plan was to now talk about journeying toward your North Star, but we are over 30 minutes in, and I have a feeling that that next component could make up an entire podcast on its own. So I'm going to go ahead and end this one here, and I hope that you'll tune in next week for the next podcast, which will be traveling toward your star, how to really make progress towards it once you've figured out what it is. Well, as always, thank you for your time. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you giving me a chunk of your day and listening and paying attention to these. And I hope that they've been of benefit to you. If you are looking to join a Discord server, a little artistic community, we have one attached to this channel, and it's in the description below. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support. And if you would like to support the channel, you can do so through the Patreon link below. On our Patreon, we have access to things early, like the scripts and outlines for podcasts like this, as well as the ability to help dictate the things that I talk about in the podcast and sketchbook sessions. Any support would be lovely and much appreciated, as is just your time watching these videos. Well, have a good one, y'all. See you soon.